Once upon a time, there lived a teacher who always ate her poor food. Her name was Veronica, and she was so beautiful that no one would ever believe that she would do such a thing. Veronica was a teacher in Nursery 3 Yellow. Her students always submitted their food to her whenever it was their lunchtime. She would lock the classroom door and eat their food one after the other, not caring that her students were hungry. Once she has eaten to her satisfaction, she will give them back the crumbs to eat. Veronica lied to the children that she was eating the germs that had infested a part of their meal, and the children who are innocent and naive surrender their food to her. In fact, Veronica began to tell the children what she wanted to eat for lunch. She would tell them one after the other to tell their parents that they wanted this or that. For instance, Naomi's mother made the best jollof and pasta. So, Veronica always demanded these meals. Another of her students, Mayan, always brought continental dishes to school because her mother was a renowned chef. Veronica ate in her field before leaving crumbs for the children to eat. One day, one of her students fainted on the school premises. She had not eaten all day, and Veronica ate all of her food without leaving any for her to eat. Veronica glared at the little girl and said, "If you dare tell anyone that I eat your food, I'll make sure no one in this class ever talks or plays with you again. You'll be alone. Do you understand me?" The poor girl, frightened and trembling, kept silent. Her name was Amara, a shy little girl whose mother cooked one of the best meals. That evening, when her mother came to pick her up from school, Amara could barely stand. The school nurse revealed to her that her daughter fainted from hunger. Veronica, trying to cover up her tracks, jumped in and began to speak. Amma refused to eat her food, though. She said she was not hungry and threw her food angrily to the floor. Mrs. Honora apologized to Veronica for what her daughter had done. She took her home and asked her why she threw her food to the floor. Amara, terrified of being ostracized in class, lied to her mother that she mistakenly poured her food. She stammered through the entire sentence, and Mrs. Hanaha could not help but see the fear in her daughter's eyes. She sat her down and asked repeatedly if there was anything that Mara wanted to tell her, but Mara shook her head, saying that it was only an accident. She then went on to tell her mother that she wanted to take jollof rice to school. This was what her teacher, Verika, had requested for earlier in school, and Mrs. Anoa could not understand why her daughter always insisted on taking jollof fries to school when she knew that Mara loved fried rice instead. That night, Mrs. Anoa could not sleep. Her daughter's behavior troubled her deeply. There was something in Amara's eyes. Fear, the kind only a child could carry when they were hiding a painful secret. The next morning, she decided to test something. She packed Amara's lunchbox herself, but this time she did not tell Amara what she had put inside. She filled the flat with plain white rice and beans, a meal that she had always disliked. Mrs. Honor had put enough snacks in her bag that she knew her daughter would like, enough to take her through the day. When Amara got to school that morning, she joined the rest of her classmates. As always, when the lunch bell rang, Veronica stood up, smiling beautifully as she said, "Children, bring your food. Remember, I must check for gems first." The poops, one after the other, brought their lunch boxes to her table. Veronica opened them one by one, sniffing each with the fake concern written all over her face. Now me. This one has small gems, so I'll clean it for you." She scooped spoonfuls into her mouth, moaning in satisfaction. May, your mommy is a wonderful cook. Don't worry, I'll handle the germs for you too." When it was Amara's stone, Veronica snatched her flask eagerly. Amara, I hope it's jollof rice today," she said as she opened the cover. The moment the aroma of plain rice and beans hit her nose, Veronica frowned and glared at Tamara. "Tell your mother to always give you jello fries for lunch," she said to Amara, who nodded as she watched Veronica devour her food. Hours later, when Amara returned home, her mother realized that she had finished her food. This was so unusual, as Amara hated rice and beans with all of her heart. In fact, Amara would rather choose to be hungry than eat rice and beans. Mrs. Honor has stared at the empty flask in disbelief. Her heart pounded as she turned it over in her hand. Not a single grain of rice or bean remained. Amara was already playing with her doll in the corner, but her mother's voice caught through the room softly. "Amara, come here, my dear." The little girl froze. Slowly, She turned and walked to her mother's side. "Did you really eat all your food today?" Mrs. Honora asked her, calm but firm. Amra's lips quivered. "Yes, Mommy," she stammered, avoiding her mother's eyes. "Are you sure?" Her mother pressed gently. "You finished rice and beans? The same rice and beans you refused to eat last week? The same one that makes you cry?" Tears welled up in Amara's eyes. That was when Mrs. Onohan knew that something was wrong. She told Amara that she was going to speak to her teacher, and Amara burst out in tears, pleading with her mother not to speak with Veronica. Mrs. Honora could see the fear in her daughter's eyes. She tried speaking to her, but Amara refused to say a word to her mother. That night, Mrs. Honor had sat at the dining table long after Mara had gone to bed. She replayed every word, every fear, every nervous glance, and then made up her mind to get to the root of the matter. The next morning, she packed jollof fries, Veronica's favorite, and smiled as she closed the lunch bag and took her daughter to school. They arrived a few minutes later, and Mrs. Honor escorted her daughter to her class. She met Veronica, who smiled at her sheepishly as she welcomed the children to class. Mrs. Hanahan noticed how Veronica was focused on their lunch boxes. She made it her duty to take all the lunch boxes from the students and arrange them on the shelves herself. To any parent watching, it would seem that Veronica took her job seriously. What they did not know was that Veronica arranged the lunch bags according to her preference. Mrs. Onohan knew that something was fishy. She walked up to the headmistress's office and laid a complaint. "Good morning, Ma. I'm so sorry to disturb you," she began politely. "It's about my daughter, Mara, and her class teacher, Miss Veronica." The headmistress looked up slightly puzzled. "Miss Veronica, what about her?" Mrs. Honora hesitated. "I may be wrong, but I have reason to believe that she's been taking my daughter's food." The headmistress's eyebrow shot up. "Taking her food? Are you certain?" "Yes, ma'am," Mrs. Hona said softly. "Amira comes home hungry and frightened every day. And yesterday, I tested something. I packed a meal. My daughter hates rice and beans, and when she got home, she claimed to have finished everything. But I know my child. She can't even stand the smell of it. Someone else is eating her food, and I strongly suspect that it's her teacher." The headmistress leaned back in her chair, frowning thoughtfully. "Mrs. Honora, I understand your concern, but Miss Veronica is one of our best teachers. She's been with us for 5 years and has never had a single complaint. She's gentle, disciplined, and adored by both staff and parents. Are you absolutely sure of what you're suggesting?" "I'm not accusing her blindly," Mrs. Ono replied, her tone steady. "But something is not right. The children are afraid of her, especially my daughter." The headmistress sighed deeply. "All right, I'll speak to her privately, but for the sake of peace, I won't mention your name or your child. I'll simply bring up the issue as a general concern." "Thank you, Ma," said Mrs. Anaha, who sounded relieved. Later that afternoon, the headmistress called Veronica into her office. Veronica walked in, smiling politely. "Good afternoon, Ma. You sent for me." "Yes, Veronica. Please sit." Veronica sat down, gracefully, unaware of what awaited her. The headmistress folded her hand. "I received a rather unusual report today. Some parents have been concerned about lunch periods in your class. There are claims that pupils' meals are being tampered with, that perhaps someone, possibly a teacher, has been eating their food." Veronica's eyes widened in shock. "What? Eating their food? Ma, that's ridiculous. I'm only asking Veronica," the headmistress said calmly. "Is there any truth to it?" "Absolutely not, Ma," Veronica replied, her voice trembling with waning outrage. "Ma, you know me. I treat those children like my own. I even help them open their flask and clean up after them. I would never do such a thing." The headmistress nodded slowly, studying her expression. "I know, Veronica. You've always been an excellent teacher, and I told the parents that as well. Still, I thought it best to hear directly from you." Veronica forced a smile. "Thank you, Ma. You did the right thing. Children can be imaginative. Sometimes they might have misunderstood something." "Yes," the head mush agreed, though her eyes narrowed slightly. "But I want you to be careful. Parents can be very sensitive about their children's welfare. Just make sure everything in your class is handled properly." "I understand perfectly, Ma," Veronica said, placing a hand over her chest. "I would never let such a thing happen in my class." When Veronica left the office, she walked down the hallway with her jaw clenched tightly. Her palms were sweaty and her heart pounded. "Who reported me?" she muttered under her breath. "Who told her?" She entered the classroom and scanned the faces of her poops. Amar's eyes darted away instantly as Veronica smirked. "So, one of you reported me to your parents. You will see what I can do from this day forward," she said as she sat on her chair angrily. From that day, Veronica became colder and more watchful. She began locking the classroom door even earlier than before and reminded them of what will happen if they ever told their parents. One morning, a new pupil named Mimi joined us with 3 yellow. Mimi was a quiet, curious girl who loved food as much as she loved the air that she breathed. Her lunchbox was always filled with delicious meat pies and snacks, the kind that made every other person stare in envy. When Veronica saw Mimi's lunch for the very first time, her eyes glistened with greed. "Ah, Mimi, bring your food. Let me check if there are gems in it," she said sweetly, stretching out her hand. But Mimi hesitated and began to speak. "My mommy said I should not give my food to anybody." Veronica frowned. "So, you don't want your teacher to help you check for germs?" The other children gasped as Mimi, terrified, handed the lunchbox over to her. Veronica quickly locked the door and sat behind her desk. She devoured the meat pie and snacks as the children sat and watched, their stomachs rumbling from hunger. Veronica ate to her fill and handed them the crumbs that remained, which could barely fill the stomach of an ant. It was such a beautiful day for her as she ate all her favorite meals and snacks. Hours later, she arrived home, and her stomach began to rumble like thunder. Veronica clutched her belly and rushed to the toilet, where she spent the entire night crying in pain. By morning, she arrived at school weak and pale. However, her greed refused to rest. She ate her purpose food one after the other, not caring about what she witnessed the previous night. She got to Mimi's turn, but Mimi refused to give her the food that her mother had packed for her. Instead, she looked Veronica in the eyes and began to speak. "Auntie, my mommy said I should not share. If you take my food, I will tell my mommy," she said as Veronica froze. She could not believe that Mimi was threatening to expose her to her mother. Veronica sent her to the back of the class and told the other students not to talk or play with her. This was her punishment for threatening to report Veronica to her mother. Veronica made sure that the entire class ignored Mimi. No one spoke to her, no one played with her, and no one shared crayons with her during their art class. Poor Mimi sat alone, her small eyes filled with tears as she regretted all that she did. Even the other children became so terrified that they could not risk being in Mimi's shoes. The next day, Veronica stood in front of the class, her hands on her hips, and she ordered the children to bring their food forward. Mimi rushed out with her food, pleading with Veronica to tell the other students to talk to her. "I will not tell my mommy again," she said to Veronica, who smelled and took the food. However, not long after she finished eating the food, her stomach began to rumble like thunder. Veronica spent hours in the toilet, wondering what could be wrong with her stomach. She clutched her belly and cried out in pain as sweat poured down her face. In that moment, Veronica felt like her life was slipping away. She began to pray to God to save her life, stating that if he saved her, she would never eat any child's food again. Veronica had never felt this much pain in her entire life. She managed to finish the day in pain and returned home, where she took several medications to calm the pain. The next morning, she arrived at school, but her greed refused to rest. The moment she smelled the children's lunch boxes, her appetite returned like a curse. "Children," she said faintly, "bring your food. I must check for germs." The poop obeyed reluctantly. They had all grown tired of the same routine. Veronica has eaten everything and given them crumbs. When it got to Mimi's turn, Veronica snatched her flax and opened it with force. The aroma hit her nose as she smiled and began to eat greedily. Mimi sat there quietly as she stared at her angrily. There was something strange and unsettling about the way she looked at her that made Veronica feel a bit uneasy. However, she ignored her and continued to eat. A few minutes later, while she was still eating, Veronica felt a sudden wave of dizziness. Her heart rate began to rise. She grabbed the edge of the table, breathing heavily as sweat poured. The children panicked. "Auntie, are you okay?" Naomi asked fearfully. Vera forced a smile even as her hands trembled. I'm fine, children. It's just a headache, she said as she slumped on her chair unconscious. The children all screamed out in terror as the headmistress rushed to their classroom to find the door locked. They broke down the door and met the children crying and screaming as Veronica lay motionless on the chair, her face pale and her breathing shallow. Call an ambulance, the headman shouted, and within minutes Veronica was rushed to the hospital. The doctors walked tirelessly, inserting drips and running several tests. Hours passed before one of the doctors stepped out, his face puzzled. Madam, he said to the headmistress, your teacher is alive, but this is strange. He found traces of a strong prescription drug in her system. Has she been taking any medication? The headmistress shook her head. Not that I know of. She's been fine until today. The doctor frowned. Well, her blood is saturated with a drug meant for a serious medical condition, something only given to patients with a rare heart condition. If she's been consuming this unknowingly for a while, it could explain her seizures and fainting. The room fell silent. Meanwhile, back at school, news had spread among the pupils. Little Mimi sat quietly in the corner of the classroom, holding her lunch, when her mother came to pick her up. The headmistress called her aside and explained what had happened. The woman's eyes widened as she asked which teacher it was. Miss Veronica, the headmistress, replied. She collapsed after eating from Mimi's lunchbox. Mimi's mother gasped, covering her mouth. Oh, dear Lord, that food wasn't meant for anyone else. My daughter has a rare heart condition. Her medication is always mixed into her food, and the dosage is very specific. Anyone who takes the medication is poisoning themselves. The headmistress froze in shock. Poison? She asked Mimi's mother, who explained that if the medication was taken in high doses, it could lead to heart failure and extreme kidney damage. I always told Mimi never to share her food with anyone, and she never told me that her teacher was eating her food. Mrs. Obesai drew her daughter closer and asked why she never spoke up. Mimi's eyes filled with tears as she began to speak. She said if I don't give her my food, she'll make everyone hate me. The day I tried to warn her not to eat my food again, she told everyone in the class not to talk or play with me. Mrs. Obesai could not believe her ears. She hugged her daughter tightly and assured her that it was now over. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, Veronica woke up to the horrifying news. The doctor revealed to her that she had been ingesting a very strong medication for months. He revealed that the medication had damaged her organs, and if she does not start dialysis immediately, she may not survive. Veronica's eyes widened in terror. I would have never been on any medication, she said to the doctor, who shrugged and revealed to her that they found traces of it in her bloodstream. Maybe someone has been giving it to you newly, he said to Veronica, who immediately remembered all the food that she had been stealing from her students. In that moment, she began to regret all that she did. She wished that she had never allowed greed to overtake her sense of responsibility, as this had cost her everything, including her job at the school. Tears streamed down her face as guilt flooded her soul. She had turned innocent children into victims of her greed, and now, karma had struck her from the most unexpected source, a sick little girl's meal. A week later, the school gathered in the assembly hall. The headmistress stood on the podium as she began to speak. Let this be a lesson to us all, she said. Greed never goes unpunished. Miss Veronica has resigned from her position. She will spend the rest of her life receiving treatment for an illness she brought upon herself. The school installed CCTV cameras in all the classrooms to prevent things like this from ever happening again. They began to take parents' complaints more seriously and monitor their teachers and pupils more closely. The lesson to be learned from this story is that greed is a silent poison, the kind that eats you from within like a cancer. Learn to be content with what you have because contentment is the greatest form of wealth. When you take what does not belong to you, you not only dishonor others, but also invite consequences you cannot control. Veronica thought that she was simply satisfying her appetite, but in the end, her greed became her punishment. Remember, not every food is meant for your mouth, and not every blessing meant for another will bring you joy. I hope you